Good evening, everyone. We've got a lively crowd. We're going to get started. I'm Lauren Henry. I'm Assistant Vice President for Alumni and Volunteer Experience. And like many of you, I am a proud alumna of this remarkable institution. And I have the pleasure of thanking you for joining us for tonight's program. Last week, as I hope you saw, the university launched the Chicago Minds campaign. To be a Chicago Mind is to be relentless, intrepid, and creative, to ask hard questions, follow them wherever they may lead, and advance ideas that shape the world. Let's take a look.
There's something different about the kind of minds that walk these streets and roam these halls. The kind of minds that love to be kept on their toes. The kind of minds that look at the world in a unique light. The kind of minds that aren't afraid to challenge the status quo. Challenge what they've been told. That aren't afraid to challenge each other. And most importantly, the kind of minds that are never afraid to challenge themselves. For they know that behind every great discovery, behind every world-changing breakthrough, there have been hundreds of hypotheses considered, reconsidered, and completely rewritten. The kind of minds that dive deeper, minds that are passionate, resilient, relentless, minds that harness the power of the atom, that expanded our sense of the possible and reshaped entire disciplines. The kind of minds that never switch off, even at 2 a.m. There's still debates to be had, opinions to be discussed, and ideas to be formed. The kind of minds that are always open, always growing, formed here and poised to shape the world. We call these minds Chicago Minds.
And so I hope each of you is proud to be a Chicago Mind, and tonight's speakers embody what it means to be a Chicago Mind. They bring a distinct lens to one of the defining challenges of our time, and all of you, our alumni, our parents, our friends, are part of that same tradition, curiously and passionately engaged with the ideas that matter most. And with that, it is my honor to introduce tonight's speakers. Kristina Costa is Managing Director for Policy and Strategic Engagement at the University of Chicago Institute for Climate and Sustainable Growth. She brings firsthand policy experience from senior roles in both the Biden and Obama administrations, and now applies that expertise to translating climate research into durable real-world strategy. Chibueze Amanchukwu is the Neubauer Family Assistant Professor at the Pritzker School of Molecular Engineering and a faculty affiliate at the University of Chicago Data Science Institute. His research is focused on the electrochemistry of energy storage, designing the next generation of batteries from the molecular level up. And Shirley Meng is the Liew Family Professor in Molecular Engineering at the Pritzker School of Molecular Engineering, Faculty Director of the Energy Technologies Initiative at the Institute for Climate and Sustainable Growth, and Director of the Energy Storage Research Alliance at Argonne National Laboratory. She is among the world's leading authorities on battery science, with work spanning fundamental materials discovery to large-scale deployment. Please join me in welcoming our speakers to the stage.
Good evening, everyone. It is such a pleasure to be here and to be apparently the hottest show on Broadway this evening. Thank you all so much for coming out. I'm incredibly excited to have this conversation with all of you and, of course, with my two wonderful colleagues here, because energy security is not, I think, normally front of mind for most Americans, but that is changing really, really fast. For the first time in decades, the US grid is contending with significant load growth, which is contributing to higher electricity prices for many Americans. Of course, the Trump administration's recent decision to launch a war against Iran has driven gas prices up nearly 50% since the start of the year, and people are really feeling squeezed by energy in a way that they're not used to. And that's all, of course, without considering the impacts that climate change is having on our communities and our power grid right now. But there is a lot of good news, and I hope that we'll be able to share a lot of that with you this evening, because this is an incredibly exciting moment for innovation in battery technology. EV adoption is rising around the world. Grid operators are increasingly integrating energy storage and battery solutions into how they manage electricity systems. And researchers, like the two phenomenal University of Chicago faculty here with me, are racing to discover new battery chemistries and to take discoveries from the lab to the market faster than ever before. So I think we're all going to learn a lot, and I'm really excited to get started. So Shirley, we're going to start with you. As everyone just heard, you are a global expert in innovative battery research and design. So can you just help us orient ourselves in this moment? Where are we right now in terms of battery technology, and more importantly, where do we need to go?
Sure. Can I first see a show of hands? How many of you own the EV, electric vehicle? Okay, not bad. Yeah, so I think if you look at the history of New York, about 100 years ago, 50 years after the launch of lead-acid batteries, there were actually a lot of electric cars running on the streets of New York City. That's about 100 years ago. So I want to walk you back a little bit to the memory lane. Actually, in 1800, in Italy, Sir Alexander Volta invented the Volta pile. And today, you still use that battery. All the AA, AAA, those disposable batteries are actually using the chemistry he discovered more than 200 years ago. And the 1860s was the lead acid, and then 50 years later, there's a lot of electric cars, but the range is so bad, and so eventually, I think it was replaced by the internal combustion engine cars. Around 1976, the first rechargeable lithium batteries were published in the magazine Science, and I think people didn't remember that, but for about 1.5 decades, scientists could not commercialize this technology because they are using lithium metal, very reactive metal, as the negative electrode, and it basically literally blew up every batteries. That was the reason it gave us the historical lesson is lithium-ion batteries that use graphite as the negative electrode is so much safer. Today, we ship out trillions of batteries each year. The failure rate is about 100 part per billion. So we still have accidents here and there, but the percentage is very low. And I think if you think about in the future, that scientists will promise you that we will have batteries never blow up. That is one of the top goals in our research, is that to give the public the ultimately safe energy storage power devices. So that's one exciting direction. The second exciting direction I think I really want to emphasize is that lithium is a rare commodity. Okay, I don't want to see a show of hands how many of you use antidepressants because lithium makes us happy, okay? I mean, seriously, all the battery scientists were extremely happy people. But
Chibueze, is it true?
Yes.
No comments.
Yeah, so sodium, actually, if you think about the periodic table, hydrogen, lithium, sodium. Yeah, so sodium is the next big wave. Sodium can do almost everything that the lithium can do, except for your cell phone and the mobile devices, because that requires extremely high volumetric energy density. But sodium can do a lot of things for the grid. And I think that is one of the latest frontier. Sodium makes you high blood pressure, right? So we should eat less and put them all into the batteries. So I hope, that give you people some, one is the ultimate safe batteries, and the other one is we found alternative to lithium ion. It's been over 50 years since we introduced a new battery chemistry to the public. It's about time.
I mean, personally, sodium also makes me pretty happy, but...
Because you're young.
But I think I would also be very happy if we had commercially available sodium batteries. It's a really difficult thing when you look at a map of the world and where are these, where are the elements, the critical minerals that we use in these batteries located. Sodium, very widely available. Lots and lots of places to get sodium. Lithium, not so much, a lot harder. So it's a really exciting thing that you're describing here. Chibueze, I don't think that we're legally allowed to have a panel in 2026 without talking a little bit about AI. I think there was an executive order on that, actually. But so there's a lot of news out there about the strain that AI is putting on the grid, and a lot of anxiety, I think rightly so, about what AI tools and agents mean for the workforce. But I think folks may not realize some of the specific ways that AI tools are actually enabling really exciting discoveries in this space, in the world of battery chemistries, that can kind of unlock this future that Shirley's describing here. So that's something your lab is working on really actively, and I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about what the challenges in battery discovery and development are that AI is helping you overcome.
Yeah, I think that is true, that how important AI can be in terms of scientific discovery. So I will talk about, so Shirley has given us the promise that we've not really invented new battery chemistries for the past 50 years. And it's not that we didn't have good ideas of what these new battery chemistries should be. Shirley is a big proponent of sodium, for example. It's that it's very difficult for you to find the right combination of materials that will allow the battery to last long. So you can cycle that battery back and forth thousands of times. And so when I started at the University of Chicago, the question was, how do I accelerate the discovery of next generation battery materials? And within any battery in your phone, there are at minimum 3 components. So you have an anode, a cathode, and an electrolyte. So an electrolyte is like seawater, for example. And so our goal is, so can we develop AI algorithms that allow us to predict the properties of electrolyte compounds in the computer so that when I go into the lab, I have a higher chance of success. And we've been able to do that, so to predict properties. And then with the rise of generative AI, so what you take for granted with ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude, so now we've been able to design systems that can say, I want an electrolyte that allows me to have a sodium-based battery chemistry that will cycle for 500 times. What types of materials should I design? And so now we're on that path to actually coming up with compounds. And what is really unique about my group is we do experiments. So it's not enough for a model to suggest something to you. It has to be tested in the real world. So I have to go into the lab, I have to synthesize that. And so we've been able to make progress on enabling this next generation battery chemistry. So it doesn't take us another 50 years or longer to come up with a next generation battery. We need these chemistries today, and AI has been playing an important role in enabling that. And so that's one thing that we're very excited that we work on in my group.
That's terrific. I think I was reading one of the news releases from your lab that we've really investigated something like, and you're going to correct me here, 10 to the 2 power of potential electrolyte chemistries, right? So like 100 different.
Yeah, 10 to the 3. Okay.
10 to the 3.
Yes,
10 to
yeah.
the 3. I was a philosophy major, so.
No. It's
but in theory, there's something like 10 to the 6 potentially available, right?
So actually, in theory, there's a potential infinite amount of electrolyte compounds. Because if you take an electrolyte could be multiple different solvents, multiple different salts, at different concentrations, at different mixture ratios. And we already know as experimentalists that each one of those combinations changes the battery performance significantly. So how do you figure out which right combination is? And you can spend an entire PhD, or you could spend your entire career just mixing and matching in the lab. But our goal is, can we accelerate that? So it's not just using AI, it's AI plus. No, we are smart people at Chicago. So the goal is you have to combine the intellect of your graduate student and your postdoc. You don't just push them to the side and say, let AI generate this. How do they tune the models in such a way that allows them to come up with novel combinations that enables the next generation battery chemistry to be successful? Yeah.
And of course, it can't test it for you.
Yeah. For now, until we have robots that come in and start to do that. Maybe.
We'll put a pin in that for now. I do want to zoom out from the lab and from the research to the economics and the geopolitics a little bit. The global supply chain for batteries today, and we were talking about this, for the lithium-ion batteries in particular, is really, really dominated by China. And for additional critical minerals that are important for batteries as well, for some of them, China or Chinese-backed companies that operate elsewhere in the world control 90% or more of the supply chain from extraction to processing to manufacturing. We were making a lot of investments in the United States to try to catch up. A lot of that has been sort of put on pause or mothballed in the last 18 months. So Shirley, small question for you. Does the U.S. stand a chance of catching up to China now? And how important is it really for energy security and economic security of the United States that we compete in the battery market?
So I have to deploy my Chicago minds for this question. Okay, yeah. Okay, so let's do some math, simple math, okay? So the US grid peak power is about 1.2 terawatt, okay? So just remember I guess the scale for gigawatt factory that you hear very often, that each gigawatt factory can produce like 100,000 cars, something like that, okay? And the terawatt is about 1,000 of gigawatt. And US peak power is that. So somebody did a mathematics calculations about how much batteries the whole world will need, okay? So skip. There is a document available. If you're interested, please let me know. We will show you how the math were actually done. But the estimate agreeable by most of the industrial leaders and academic leaders is about 300 terawatt hour of batteries. So I can say in the human history of 200 years of battery history, lead acid and lithium ion are the only two chemistries that reach 1 terawatt hour per year production capacity today. So I hope people get some sense about this 90% dominance. 90% dominance of the 5% is still less than 5%. Right? So I hope that people really recognize that in order for electrification, if you think electrification of transportation and look around your life, I think electrification, because the infrastructure by grid is much easier to establish. Mm-hmm. So if we think about that, I absolutely positive about US, Europe, each of the countries stand a chance to really think about up to 2050, how would us want to position ourselves in terms of this supply chain challenge. Mm-hmm. And we actually tackle this problem as the person who lead the Energy Storage Research Alliance for Argonne National Lab. Two important approach. One is substitution, mm-hmm. right? So that's why sodium is going to take off, and I think we are working very closely, not just among US researchers, but with researchers in India, researchers in Australia, in Europe. A lot of us are working on replacement, substitution. The second very important strategy is really recycling. US is still the biggest purchaser for batteries. We buy a lot of batteries for the grid, for the data center. So today, the AI data centers, annual growth rate is 80% in terms of purchasing of the lithium-ion batteries. Once those batteries are on the land of America, there is no way we will put it into the dump land waste. Yes. So recycling is the absolute key. So we call it the urban mining. So for people who live in New York City, just think about how much urban mining you can do to mine all the disposable batteries that you have. Just check your house. I know that you have some batteries. Yeah, so I think these two important strategies can potentially be game changers. That does not replacing the onshore manufacturing. Like chips, so I always say chips is the brain. Mm-hmm. Battery is the power. So these two onshore manufacturing must happen. And I think that's what, Kristina, you did a lot of work to make that happen. And we cannot stop. We have to keep going. And I think the momentum in the industry is already established. So I do believe that you're going to see more onshore manufacturing for the batteries.
Yeah, and I really like, Shirley, sort of the reframing of my very unfair question to you. That is, there is this just huge potential for growth, regardless of what the world looks like right now in terms of where are we extracting, processing, manufacturing, using batteries. Kind of the sky's the limit, and so we can define our own playing field.
Yeah, I really want the people to think beyond 2050. That's the time horizon we're looking at. And I think it's only at the very beginning we have to think about all these strategic decisions about what we do next 25 years.
Absolutely. You started to tee up the load growth issue and how batteries are increasingly being used on the grid. And Chibueze, your work touches on this in important ways. We were talking that more grid operators are seeing battery storage as an important way to both integrate renewables into the grid, smooth out that intermittency, build greater resilience to disruptions and to blackouts. But in the US, it hasn't been without controversy in some cases, including here in New York, where there have been a few battery storage projects that have been sort of met with opposition from local communities over safety concerns, over this idea that maybe they're going to blow up and cause big problems. What sort of is the nature of that concern? How real is it, and what should we be thinking about doing about it?
So I think it is fitting that we are here in New York and talking about integration of batteries, for example, into the grid. So how many of you are aware of moratoriums on battery storage in your neighborhoods here in New York? About, I see some hands, whereby some neighborhoods have said we will not longer allow, or we will pause installment of battery energy storage systems for 1 year or 2 years. How many of you are aware of that for your own local governments? Okay, I see hands. What? Okay. So it's actually, I think in New York, of all the states in the US, there are more moratoriums on BESS in New York than all the other states combined.
Battery energy storage systems.
Yeah, so BESS.
BESS.
BESS. And the idea here is you can, as what Kristina mentioned, you can have batteries in the grid, you can have batteries next to your home, for example, to allow you to integrate maybe solar, wind, or other resources. And one of the primary reasons that, I guess at the end, when we get questions, feel free to share your own opinions. One challenge has been safety, and so there have been some fire incidents, some in New York, a lot, so one big one in California, for example, in Moss Landing. And so that has forced people to kind of say, oh, wait, not in my backyard, the same comments. So the challenge there is a safety challenge with lithium-ion batteries. It's not for all lithium-ion batteries, so there are different battery chemistries. So one challenge with the lithium-ion battery is that I would consider it a misnomer. There are multiple different chemistries within a lithium-ion battery. So one safer one uses lithium iron phosphate, for example. And so there's an argument to be made that we should have specific types of chemistries for the grid. But one of the biggest challenges has been, I don't want to take the risk. So Shirley said it's 100 parts per billion, for example. But because it's a technology that most of us are not familiar with, we don't even know are we okay with 100 parts per billion? I don't know how to understand that, and that's valid. And so the question is, so now because of those incidents, New York has updated their fire codes, for example, are better training firefighters such that they are aware of these types of hazards. And then there are new laws on how close they could be to certain neighborhoods or to schools or to homes. And so that's all things that come with new technologies. From a science point of view, our question is, can we make them intrinsically safer? So why are they unsafe today? So one big reason for that is they use flammable organic solvents. So one research within my group is to replace that, to just have a system that has no solvents. Does that improve the safety profile and make it more relevant for the grid? Another concern is also cost. So can you get the cost of these batteries much lower? So by moving, for example, from lithium to sodium or potassium, is that enough to bring the cost low? But safety has been one of the big reasons for pushback from communities. and because just an unfamiliarity with the technology, which is expected. I also don't know what the challenges are until we have them in the real world. And then we keep getting training for workers, for homeowners to be able to familiarize themselves with the technology.
And do you see that, do you think that we're sort of on the right path to getting that level of familiarity, or is there, I suspect there's more work to do?
There is more work from a policymaker point of view. So what information do you need to know as a homeowner to be comfortable with these chemistries? So there's, from all levels, from a technology, can we better train or educate people about the benefits, but also the hazards, however low they may be, as well as for policymakers to ensure that our firefighters know what battle they're fighting when they come in, and that they are better trained, they have the resources to do so. And then there have been studies that show a big challenge is, okay, if I see these plumes of battery fires, what happens to our health and to the environment? And there have been studies by the EPA that shows that there's not too much of an effect, or there's not seen an effect, for example, in the Moss Landing fires, to the health and the environment of that area after the fire. So a lot of that is learning, both technical, but also from a policy point of view.
Yeah, and I think, you know, it's also such a different dynamic than, for instance, places that, you know, we're home to factories that used to make lead-acid batteries, right? Where lead, of course, has this very well-known set of hazards, very long-lasting in the environment, very dangerous to children. And so, you know, people are really familiar with that, obviously, and that's probably also causing some of the anxiety about these less familiar chemicals.
And for very good reason. So it's our job now to make sure we make the batteries safer, so we don't have these incidents, and then to educate the public so they are aware of the benefits, but also the hazards that these might pose.
I want to go and think a little bit about when might we see these wonderful new batteries that we're talking about here actually available for use in vehicles, on the grid, in our homes. And you know, the process from discovery to commercialization is really, really fraught. So what, in your view, for both of you, when do you think, optimistically, pessimistically, might we see, like, realistically see some of these next generation batteries becoming available and more widely used?
Yep.
Do you want to start, Shirley?
I can start. In 2017, I have a publication in Science called the Liquefied Gas Electrolyte that enable ultra-low temperature performance. So it's a battery
page turner. Everyone should read it.
Battery built for space and high, you know, if you think about Air Force, SpaceX, and all these things. The journey was very tough from the bench top to scaling. So we typically say we go through 2 death valleys, right? The first death valley is really the scaling death valley. The second death valley, we passed the first death valley. The second death valley is that, you know, I think the commercialization opportunity is not always there. Just when we think the EV is going to have the exponential growth, something external happened, and we slow down. And I think right now the company is still surviving and is having some major discussion with the OEMs about how to deploy that through partnership with major companies like Tesla, LG. But the journey, I think, for any hardcore science, you know, if you even have NVIDIA people talk to you about how the GPUs become a mainstream now, it's decades of hard work. So I think typically for material scientists to discover something brand new, then scale up to commercial impact, 15 years was the average time. And we were really hoping with the revolution of AI, this time will be shortened. I think 7 to 8 years was the target, but any time, I think there are a lot of our alumni who work in the actual field where things need to be made. It's not just a software, it's a really, you know, we have to make things at scale. I think it's really a decade-long hard work. And I often spend time with a lot of investment funds and, you know, to kind of also educate the people who are investing in this climate and energy, that to have the patience for 7 to 10 years. And I think, that's really my own experience. And I think we are looking forward to see how AI can shorten this 15 years timeline in the near future.
That's really helpful. Chibueze, do you want to?
Yeah. So I have not gone on the journey yet that Shirley just mentioned. So most of our work has still been focused on fundamental science. And I think the question now, as I mature in my career as a professor, to start thinking about, okay, with these breakthroughs that we're having in the lab, what would it take to actually scale it up to the real world? But we've not begun that journey yet.
Not begun yet.
Yeah.
So we're hearing patient capital. We're hearing customers are important. No surprise. We're hearing that it is difficult to actually build things in the physical world. It turns out that's a complicating factor that we have to contend with. Before we go to audience questions, I want to ask one more thing of both of you, which is to once again try to predict the future a little bit. Keeping in mind all of those things that we've been talking about, I want you to imagine that we're having this conversation here again 10 years from now. It's 2036. I have Miranda Priestley's hair. We've figured out how all of this AI stuff is going to sort out. What do you think will have changed, or what do you hope will have changed, and what do you think will be familiar about how we are using batteries and what the battery sector looks like in the U.S. and around the world?
Another very difficult question.
Hard one,
Yeah. So at the moment, I think in the United States, there's a a handful of gigawatt factory. Okay? Very important to remember, I can use one hand to count. And I think if we think about the data center for AI that all these batteries need, and then to mention, the EV might take a second wave to come back. I also want to say that my point about the EV is really the efficiency of the engine, because the electric motor and the electric chemistry does not involve burning. So don't know how many of you are engineering trained. I know there's a chemical engineer there. Yeah. So Carnot limit is 40%. In electrochemistry, our efficiency is 90% or above. So we only champion for EV because of the efficiency, not because of the CO2. I mean, could be because for some, but I want to say that personally,
Shirley,
history cannot be reversed. Humanity always chose more efficient technologies, right? So that's where I think 10 years later, I really believe the second wave of electrification of transportation would happen. And I also think that the biggest hope I have is for a lot of sovereign funds and pension funds, those capital that have 10, 15, 20 years patience, they're going to view manufacturing for chips and batteries and those important infrastructure projects will be absolutely beneficial for the society. And I want to say that I'm an engineer with a little bit of training from Chicago because of the best business school. I just want to say that the scientist's job is to make sure our sovereign funds and the pension funds are well informed about what technology to bet on today, so that 10 years later, when we sit in this room, the global good, everybody should benefit from the investment we made today. So I really hope that in 2036, in the New York City, we'll meet a lot of happy investors that you have invested in infrastructure for energy. I hope so. Yes. We're planning for that. Yes.
Chibueze, what do you think? 10 years?
10 years. So when you asked that question, I kind of did. So 10 years ago, I was a PhD student. And I was trying to think, okay, what would I have predicted 10 years from 2016? So one, battery prices came down significantly during that time. All of a sudden, it became feasible to have batteries on the grid. So I think in 10 years' time, we will see even greater integration of batteries within the grid, but almost a fracturing of whereby every country figures that they need to have their own self-security, and batteries help make that possible, whereby I'm going to have a solar panel here, I'm going to have a wind turbine there, a small modular reactor here, and with my battery chemistry, to almost have I think the decentralization will become even greater as the global order gets fractured even more and more. And so can we manufacture things here? I think I predict maybe in 10 years' time that we can actually manufacture here in the US, because we need to be able to ensure that to have these technologies to have energy security, that we need to manufacture, we need to make things here. Mm-hmm. And so that's my prediction, that we have more battery chemistries in the grid, that we almost have a decentralized society whereby we need to make everything here and grow here internally. So that's just my mini prediction.
Yeah, I think that's I think a really interesting place to pull the conversation back out wide again, and to end on before we go to our brilliant Chicago minds in the audience, which is, we've had a little bit of a US-centric conversation here, just given where we are in the world, but since the war in Iran began, we have seen impacts here, but nothing compared to what countries in East Asia, in South Asia, in Southeast Asia, in Africa are contending with as they are dealing with these disruptions to oil supplies, to LNG supplies, to fertilizer supplies, that huge amounts of the world's fertilizer normally transit the Straits of Hormuz. And you're seeing increases month over month in China exporting clean energy technologies to these places. You're seeing 1970s style energy conservation measures having to take hold in places like the Philippines and Indonesia and Vietnam and so on and so forth. And I don't think they're going to be that patient or that eager to go back to these kinds of vulnerabilities once the hostilities cease. And so the U.S. is a huge market, and what we do here in terms of innovation and the amazing research that happens at places like the University of Chicago is a huge gift not only to us but to the world. But I think it's going to be a very different global energy system 10 years from now. I think it's going to be a fairly different global energy system 10 months from now. And I'm excited to see where the work that you are both doing is going to play a role in that. So I think we have a couple of roving mics, and our wonderful colleagues, Christine and Alex, are going to come find people who are raising their hands.
Hi, my name is Nicole McKnight, college 2002. How susceptible is our grid to terrorism and cyber attacks? And how much do you think about that?
He was reading the book.
Yeah. He has a book with him.
I think very, very much so. I think, and even with the proliferation of AI-based methods, there are lots of reports that it is easier now to launch attacks, and attacks can be done by people who don't have the lots of training to be able to do those attacks. So I think it is easier and easier in the age of AI. I think that's where the power of decentralization comes in, whereby you have multiple different grids for different homes or different neighborhoods, for example. But I think it's always going to be a rat race. There will always be attacks, and then how do you respond to those attacks, and how do you make sure that our infrastructure is not vulnerable to single points of attack? I think, although my work doesn't interface with cyber attack and preventing cyber attacks, but the grid is very vulnerable, and we can imagine what would happen today if we just lost access to power for 10 hours, for example. Those blackouts are getting more and more often, not necessarily today due to cyber attacks, but more due to a changing climate in which we are not prepared for, but I can imagine they will be exacerbated by attacks.
Just add my 2 cents. U.S. grid, we were in Chicago. I was studying all the history, right? So, the World Fair back then, 100 plus years ago, the introduction of the electricity. I think U.S. grid is very aged. So it's time to upgrade. So given to your point, this is the perfect time, both from the power electronics hardware perspective and the software. It's a time for upgrade and time for all the higher education, the institutions, the national labs to really think about, imagine what's the grid of the future for the United States. I think also very critically, I was hear parents complain to me, oh, my kid did computer science, but now AI is writing all the codes. What's going to happen to their jobs? Pivot. You pivot to areas where the brilliant minds are needed. And I would say cybersecurity is one of the key areas that I believe a lot of software engineers will find their new contributions to the society. I think it's really important area that you mentioned.
Hi, John Del Pescio. There's a lot of money involved in this technology, I would think, and also, as you mentioned, it's geopolitical. Is there free exchange of information, for example, with your Chinese colleagues on this technology?
Yeah, I can take that one. So, so we do track all the subsidiaries that before 2022, I think this is their 15th five-year plan, but before the 14th fifth-year plan, we do track all the subsidies that the government gave to battery industry. So that's, you talk about involving the investment. So I think that the communication in the past was, especially under the Obama administration, was actually really critical, where we recognize the two biggest economy that are doing this electric vehicle battery, simultaneously. The differences is really China since the 11th fifth plan, 12, 13, 14, consistently put battery as the national top priority, right? So I think that's where, so yes, we have all the numbers, how much government has invested. And in the United States, I would say that this current period is extremely difficult time. I can say on behalf of my field, it is extremely difficult time now in terms of the funding. But I would say also it's testing the resilience. I have to say, for the first time in my life, I actually really thought, I didn't recognize that AI is going to push the battery field to the next level because of the need from data center for the better batteries for AI. And I think this is where I see those moments where investment in one area could push for the growth in the other area, and I hope that we can leverage that. Yeah, we're talking about $1 trillion scale of investment there.
Oh, hi. So from the comments you've made so far about lithium-ion, sodium, I'm interpreting those as being largely related to sort of liquid electrolytes. I'm just curious, there's been a bit of an advancement lately, it seems, in solid-state batteries. Can you just talk about that and your view of the prospects for that?
You're going to be the favorite questioner. Shirley and Chibueze are going to be so excited right now.
Okay, so in almost every conferences, I was asked this question that I said I didn't bring my crystal ball. But today, actually, I brought my crystal ball. So, yeah, I want to say, for solid-state batteries, first of all, people should really think about why we're doing solid-state. So, this safety thing is really something that keep in our mind because, even 100 parts per billion is not good enough. So that's the first priority, that we want to be able to do batteries that never catches fire. So solid-state batteries have the potential to reach that goal. And the second one is really come to with so-called, I name battery as infrastructure. In solid state, we have something called the electrolyte is so robust, so it does not allow the byproduct of the side reaction to passing from anode and the cathode. So in all your batteries right now, because it's liquid, so any side reaction happen on the surface, they exchange between the negative and the positive, and that's one of the major degradation mechanisms in your batteries, and that's why battery life degrade. In solid state, because nothing flows, so there is opportunity. You can make a century-old, yes, 100 years old batteries. That was the ultimate. So you think about it if you're an insurance company, right? Like when you buy a house, there is a battery installed. That can be a real asset because I can pass on to my son, and my son can pass on to his son. So that, I think, are two major things I want to say. And currently, the solid-state battery, the first prototype will come out next year. So I hope if we have other events, it will come out, but not in any large format. Not in any large format. We can make this kind of battery with extremely expensive materials and a very difficult process. So they are valued very high. So where do you think the first product will be? It's either going to be in the robot. I don't know if you have bought a robot, but in the robot, I heard that people are willing to pay $100,000 for a robot. So the profit margin there for the battery can be there. The second possible area is really in the wearables. So think about all the glasses. So the beautiful thing about solid state is I can make it into any shape. So the frame, the decoration on your glasses, they can all be batteries nowadays with solid state because nothing flows. So I think we'll wait 2027. I am sure one or two of the companies are going to release their first product, but not in EV and not in large scale storage. Yeah, so if I'm wrong, yeah, please track me down.
Find that email.
Yes, it's actually a very exciting time for solid state now. Yeah.
If we're wrong, we'll talk about it next year.
I think, that's where my reputation will be seriously damaged.
So she may not come for the...
Hi, how are you? I'm a parent of a U Chicago. Unfortunately, she's not able to attend, but she did have a question. Will sodium batteries take over in cars too? And the reason is lithium was usable for grid storage for cars, but because the sodium density is not as good as lithium, how do you see the future of those new technology
Your daughter
for cars?
is very well versed with the...
Can I just say it's the most U Chicago thing to have the question anyway, even though you can't be here. I love it.
Yeah, so I think one beautiful thing about battery chemistries is that once new battery chemistries are developed, they don't necessarily displace batteries in current applications. The beautiful thing is that they open new applications. So the idea for sodium, for example, is it will be difficult for it to compete with energy density in current electric vehicles, but it will find use, for example, in grid scale applications or other applications in which, for example, cost is important or energy density is not the prime metric of interest. So while lithium is dominating electric vehicles and is expected to continue to do so, it may not be the right chemistry relevant for grid or right chemistry relevant for low temperature usage in which sodium can shine. So I think that's what we are excited about as a community, is that if you develop sodium, for example, you open up new applications that lithium may not be the best chemistry for.
Yeah. Sodium can be used in the cars, especially in ultra cold region. So don't be surprised that some sodium prototypes might be running in Minnesota and Chicago in the winter. Yeah, so we've seen minus 40 C, minus 40 degrees Celsius. So that's 0 Fahrenheit or below 0 Fahrenheit?
Below 0.
Below.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Almost minus 40
yeah,
Fahrenheit.
please let your daughter know that
Yeah.
we might prototyping in showing its performance in Chicago when it's in February.
I think we have time for one more question. So Alex and Christine, get us a good one.
I'm Liew, MBA 11. My question is touching on something Shirley mentioned earlier, recycling of batteries. So I have heard people resisting EV because they think, right after the end of the life for the EV, they don't know what's going to happen to the battery. It might create more pollution overall. So I just want to get your take on what's the current state of battery recycling, what percentage are recycled versus what is possible in the future?
Thank you. Yeah. Currently, about 20% of the lithium-ion batteries are recycled. Partly also, I think the mandate is not there. I think in 2030 or 2035, Europe will mandate that the EV seller will be responsible for the recycling. At the moment, I believe in the US, there's no such mandate yet. So I think, most of the, I think it's important to recognize companies like Tesla. If you buy your second car, it's also Tesla, they will assure you it's recycled. But if you then switch to BMW, okay, they may not take back your car. And that's, I think, a very difficult situation. I would also zoom out a bit saying, your cell phone, your tab, laptop, you already paid for recycling. So actually, you look at your bill from Apple, it's already there. There's a recycling fee. How much is actually recycled? No one actually checks. Nobody knows. So I believe this is the part where I will assure you, technology-wise, we are ready to roll. We already resolved all the recycling steps. It's called direct recycling. Actually, it's a program led by Argonne National Lab to show how lithium-ion battery is different from lead acid. That's why it has to be recycled differently. Technology-wise, we're very further along, but policy-wise, we're very behind. So I think this is where the scientist is asking for your help. Can someone please, because this kind of lack of the mandate in lead acid, as you imagine, because lead is toxic, so there's a strict mandate about recycling. But I think if we consider all the lithium or even the copper in your car, the electric car uses a lot of copper. If you think those critical elements are so important, I think we should have some policy in place so that we can make recycling easier for the users and also profitable for the people who are doing recycling.
So that's your homework.
Yes.
Take it seriously. We'll look forward to hearing your best ideas. Please, everyone, join me in thanking Shirley and Chibueze for their time.
Thank you all so much. And I'll ask you all to join me in thanking our professors again, but also Kristina for an amazing conversation. And of course, always many thanks to you for your questions sent in from other places. I would expect absolutely nothing less from a University of Chicago audience. And I always find myself leaving these evenings with more questions and more ideas than I ever bring to the discussion. And that is just, to me, the highest possible compliment, because it reminds me of being in the classroom at Cobb Hall. It's something I so deeply associate with our university, and it makes me even prouder every time to be part of the community. So I hope you all are leaving a little bit prouder and recognizing that just being here tonight staying curious, staying engaged, bringing your full attention, bringing your questions, that you are our Chicago Minds in action. And I'm so grateful to you for being part of this community and part of the discussion tonight. And so now I am all that is between you and drinks and dessert and more conversation with each other. So I'm going to thank you again for being here, and we'll stay on this floor. And thank you again to our speakers, and have a great evening.